Brilliance Audio presents Death Unleashed by Steve McHugh, performed by Simon Mattox, Elizabeth Nolden, Sean Grindal and Steve West. For someone who could use fire magic to keep warm and was still bloody freezing, I'd been sitting on the frozen ground under a large tree for the better part of an hour. I was wrapped up warmly in a big dark brown coat and thick trousers and carried several books that helped keep the cold out, but I still didn't want to be here. While my fire magic kept me warm, I couldn't use too much of it for fear that someone would see, and I'd have to explain why steam was rising from all around me. The Malaya Nevka River was a stone's throw away, its icy top a crust on the frozen water beneath it. Any human who fell in would die in moments. Even a sorcerer like me would certainly remember the time without any fondness. I sighed, ignoring the suspicious glance from the man who walked past me. It was early in the morning, and the only people out right now were those working and those up to something bad. I definitely looked like I belonged in the second camp. Stretching, I walked toward the bank of the river, hoping I hadn't been sent here for no reason. 2 decades ago, I'd left Avalon when it had become apparent to me that it was built on corruption, and that even Merlin, a man I'd once considered a father figure, was capable of evil, but had convinced himself he was doing the right thing. The murders he'd ordered committed in the name of keeping Arthur alive in his coma still haunted me. I'd left Avalon and done very little else since. I'd just been beginning to figure out what I was meant to do next when Hades had offered me a job. Come to St. Petersburg, help him with someone who wanted to escape Hera's grasp, and maybe it would help me discover what I should do with my life. So far, it had only helped me realize that Russia was a mess. Economically, socially, everything was heading toward disaster. I'd been in Russia for a few months arranging everything, and the longer I'd spent in the company of workers and commoners, the angrier I'd seen them become. The ice 30 feet back from the bank broke, and a gloved hand reached out to find purchase on the frozen surface. A second later, the hand vanished back beneath, then re-emerged 10 feet farther toward me as it smashed through again. This time, a second hand appeared, grabbing hold of part of the fractured ice, but the hand slipped and fell back into the dark water. "Just swim to the bank," I said, probably slightly louder than needed. Either he heard my instruction, or he decided the bank was the best idea anyway, as less than a minute later, the cold, wet man dragged himself out of the water and onto the mud. He was taller than my own 5'9" by a few inches, but slighter in frame than I was, gaunt almost. His looming presence was, frankly, disconcerting. I walked down to him, helped him to his feet, and practically dragged him up the bank before dropping him on the grass behind a stone wall. "What if they see me?" he asked in Russian, his voice trembling from the cold. "They think you're dead," I told him, speaking his own language. "At least, I hope they do." "They poisoned, beat, stabbed, and shot me before throwing me into a frozen river," he said. "I very nearly was dead." "Well, if they don't think it now, they never will," I told him. "Why didn't you just pretend to die after the poisoning?" "Didn't realize I was poisoned until it was too late. By that point, they'd stabbed me. I pretended to die then, but apparently they needed to shoot me first. Have you ever been shot? It hurts like the fires of hell." "Yes, I've been shot," I said. "Now, to the world, Rasputin is dead. And in his place is... Actually, I have no idea. Call yourself Fred, if you want." "I will call myself whatever you wish, so long as you take me from Hera's grasp." "That's why I'm here." "How are we leaving?" "We have a carriage to take us to Finland, where we'll be getting on a boat to England, where we'll be changing to another boat to America. Once in New York, well, I'll explain that later." I took Rasputin to the nearby carriage where its driver nodded a greeting. "Any trouble?" I asked him. He shook his head. "Clothes are inside." "Get changed," I told Rasputin. "You're wearing fine clothing, and despite them being saturated and covered in mud, it's a bad idea for where we're going." Rasputin nodded and removed his coat, revealing the orange glyphs lit up over his arms. Fire magic, keeping him warm and dry. It was why he hadn't died in the river. Being a sorcerer certainly had its advantages, although Rasputin was quite low on the power levels when it came to our kind. He was manipulative, cunning, and shrewd, but not powerful. He used fire and air magic like me, although I'd gone to great pains to explain to him that should he cross me, I would kill him. I climbed in the carriage just as Rasputin was pulling on a shirt, showing the scar in his stomach where a silver knife had been used to try to kill him a few years earlier. Hera sent you here to steer the Tsar and his family toward actions that benefited her, I said, as the carriage set off, like keeping Europe from descending into war. Rasputin nodded. Didn't work out so well. The war is a mistake. I actually agree with Hera on that. Me too, I said. It's a waste of time, money, resources, and more importantly, people. Lives thrown away because of pettiness and politics. But once the war started, Hera changed her position, using you to get information about the Russians' military plans. She saw an opportunity and didn't care how many lives were sacrificed to benefit her. I know what I've done, Rasputin snapped. Hera craves power over all else. She might not have wanted the war initially, but once it happened, she was happy to use it to her own ends. She constantly switched sides, playing them off one another, to ensure that whoever wins, she's on their side. I cannot work for her any longer. Hera has started rumors that you and the Tsars are members of a pro-German group, that you're encouraging the Tsar to make a separate peace treaty with Europe. A lot of people want your head. As I discovered, Rasputin said. Thank you for arranging my death, by the way. It took me a couple of weeks to put the idea in a few heads that your death would be better for Russia, I said. Funny, they didn't take much convincing. They really don't like you. I may have suggested some suitable methods. Ensuring you were disposed of in the right manner was important. The last thing we want is them cutting your head off or using silver. Decapitation could kill us just as it would any human, and silver hurt like hell.